All right, guys, I wanted to watch this, see what's going on with Zepla. Hopefully she's doing good. I'll go ahead and record it here as well. There we go. Make sure my stuff is down. There we go.
So I am
I have a snack while I'm
actually
doing
hooked
it.
on World of Warcraft again. It's true. I am soaring through Dragonflight because it has been fire. I have been dragging my friends into the game because there's dragons that you can play. I'm a Draknir. And before you say, oh, Zepla, I didn't know you played World of Warcraft. Well, let me tell you something, Sonny. I've been playing World of Warcraft for probably longer than you were born. I've been playing it since the 1800s. I remember when
The
this was all
1800s, holy
I have
shit.
actually seen every single BlizzCon line since the first one in October 2005. But last fall, I actually got to go to my first BlizzCon in person. This is really what did it in for me because I
This is what we're having for
see
snack,
Chris
guys.
Metzen crush
A little
it on
Philadelphia
stage.
cream
I was
cheese
in
thing
one
with
of
some
the
bagel
front rows.
bites.
Oh my god! I saw Murlocs
Some
and
turkey meat sticks.
I built a lightsaber, and then Yoda showed up. That part wasn't at BlizzCon, but it was like next door. So I mean, basically, I gotta say, it feels so great to be able to have fun in the game again. Not only with my old pals that I raided with back in the day, my fellow senior citizens of Azeroth, but also now my Final Fantasy buns. We got some guilds going, and we're on this brand new adventure together, playing both games. And I guess I'm spreading my buns all over the place now. So I have some very hyped news for you today. First of all, we are going to be creating.
It's good for her, man. I'm so glad to hear it when people.
Because this channel is mostly
they have good groups of people to play with.
That is how it's going to stay. With occasionally a video here and there like this one that might be about something different. We already made a Hoyoverse channel, Zeplaverse, but for WoW, maybe y'all can help me brainstorm some names in the comments for the WoW channel, like Zepzeroth or Zepshire Inn, Zep Grimar, Zep Norai. I don't know if it was a but today we have an exclusive interview about the next expansion with the World of Warcraft devs. So it's gonna be about what you can expect, and that is gonna be in the latter part of this video. Before diving into that, I wanted to first share my general impressions and some general information about this next expansion for those of y'all who might not know about it. So you're gonna have context going into that interview. I have been very fortunate to get into the alpha, so I've played it, and there's lots to cover. So let's hop in. First off, let's talk about warbands. So this is a pretty BFD, big freaking deal for all of the characters on your account. It's going to make it so much easier to play lots of characters, account-wide bank, account-wide currencies, flight paths, reputations, a ton of achievements. This warbound equipped gear. You can get the gear and then send it to an alt, and then it will be bound to them once they equip it. But most importantly, all transmog across all armor types can be learned on any character. If you pick up a cute dress that's cloth and you're on a Death Knight or a plate wearer class, you can learn that appearance, and then your cloth wearers on your account can use that appearance. This is a really big deal to me, and I'm going to tell you why. One lucky and very unlucky day. I was trying to get that blindfold that drops off of Illidan, and so I was farming him in Black Temple, and the Warglaive of Azeroth dropped for my druid. Obviously, I was so excited until I remembered that I was on a druid who can't pick up a Warglaive of Azeroth. I don't know why. She can pick up a staff and it shouldn't be that different, but she can't pick it up. At that time, I molded so hard that I actually saw into the future. Like, I was on such industrial grade copium that I said to myself, maybe someday they'll make it so I can add this to my account-wide transmog. I'll just keep it just in case. And people laughed. You know, they said, that's impossible. That's crazy. They're never going to do that. Well, who's laughing now? Actually, is this going to apply retroactively? I hope so. I think so. They did say that this change will apply to anything you have in your bank or bag, will go to your warband account-wide collection. So I think I'm good. They've also updated the login screen so you can pick your 4 best friends, your MySpace top 4.
This whole warband system where everything's going to be like across your account, I just can't be more happier with that. It's so good for how far along we are in the lifespan of this game. We need it.
four of your characters on your account to sit and relax around a campfire. And I love how, like, I have this demon in the background. I have this sexy incubus who's just like standing, and he's like, hey, can I come up here with y'all? No, okay, that's fine, I'm cool, I'm chill, I'll sit back here. Another major feature of the War Within that I'm pretty stoked on is delves, and I guess you could say it is deeply immersive because you go deep, you immerse yourself. Basically, this is a whole other progression and a leveling path. The amazing thing about it is you can go in here solo or with.
Hello? Hello? No, I'm good with that. Yeah. No, you already ordered. How long ago did you order the pizza? Oh, yeah, just come on home. Yeah. Okay. Maybe give me a root beer. I want a root beer. All right. I love you, babe. Bye. Sorry about that, guys.
With up to 5 people of any class, like the roles don't matter at all, and you can choose the difficulty that you're comfortable with, so you can scale it up and up and up and get like a nightmare mode difficulty if you want to, or just use it for leveling. Kind of reminds me of Deep Dungeon in that way from FF, but I have done them all solo so far on the alpha, and I think they've been really fun and not overwhelming to do them alone. You're not really alone.
I'm pretty excited to try delves.
Yeah, you have Bran. Keep her feet on the ground. Anyway, I think delves is a real crowd pleaser because this is something that is for everyone. Like if you're casual, you can go in there and get mounts and pets and transmogs and stuff. If you want a challenge, you can pick the one that says this is unfathomably difficult, and you're going to be able to flex to others. Like if you soloed it on a very high floor, then that's going to be a flex. Another cool thing is the hero talents. Now I have not
hero talents. All right, let's see what I might be playing, guys, because I might be playing my warrior, which would be probably Ali. I think probably a Slayer warrior. I don't know. Colossus sounds cool too, but then Mountain Thane sounds pretty cool. So I'll be doing some warrior stuff. What else will I do? Shadow Pen. Ooh, dude! If you get to like call in the Shadow Pen to come help you, that'll be so cool as a Windwalker monk. Okay, what else? And then Rider of the Apocalypse. That one sounds pretty cool. What else looks cool within the rest of them? Crossfire Mage sounds pretty cool. And so does Spellslinger. Should be an interesting tree to go down.
Because there's a million specs, and that's beyond the scope of this video today. We're just trying to familiarize people with the War Within. It's like subclassy mini talent trees that you can choose from to modify your class fantasy in different ways. For example, Sentinel spec for Hunter. I love this because it's like ultimate night elf fantasy. You summon this big ass owl that poops moonfires on your enemy. Okay, actually, it looks like they changed the spell effect, so it looks more like he's spitting it, not pooping it, which is definitely better. Or is it better? I don't know. Mountain Thane spec for warrior is so cool. You get lightning bolts popping off. You're almost like a shaman. You become this avatar of the storm and you start thunder clapping cheeks. Then there's the shaman, actually also very cool. The Stormbringer spec I really love for enhancement. You're summoning on these.
Dude, I can see myself getting the shaman again.
Dogs, and there's lightning everywhere. I love electrocuting stuff. You can just call me Zapla. Now, there have been a couple of hero specs that I have tried that I think need a little work. One of those was Trickster Rogue. I thought it was, I wasn't that inspired by it. I thought it wasn't mischievous enough. Another one is Hellcaller Warlock, which is really sick, but it's based on satyrs, which is like my original husbando. It was that first satyr that I met in Teldrassil. So I love that, like Night Elf Warlock. Really cool. If you get a button that turns into a satyr, it's awesome. But the whole thing is revolving around this dot, and it's like, okay, the dot will proc. I don't like dots. That's why I play Destra. Anyway, I don't want to get in a whole tangent about this. Yeah, that's for the other channel. Another thing is that this is going to be the introduction to the World Soul Saga. So one of the reasons that BlizzCon was so hyped was because they announced not just one expansion, but 3 expansions. This is all going to cover a whole saga that spans 3 whole expansions. The World Soul Saga. And so it is a new arc.
Sorry,
This trailer felt like
fix it for her. The World Soul Saga. How it should be
no
said.
other trailer I'd ever seen.
The World Soul Saga.
Quests in the alpha that
the
were
World
quite moving, that
Soul
I
Saga.
Felt emotional about. There was one in the Isle of Dorne. There's this earthen you help out, and he's like a sweet old man basically, and he keeps getting lost. And I don't want to spoil it for you, but I thought it was really thoughtfully made and well written. And I would know because I have a creative writing degree. Okay, so I'm actually pretty qualified. I'm just saying. I did enjoy the story a lot so far. They've also had a story in the live version of the game that's like a pre-story leading in to War Within, and I liked it quite a lot. I also thought the cutscene was really well done. The way Ilaria was like doing her expressions and eyebrows. Now, the last major thing that I want to get into is the new allied race, and that's the Earthen, or really it's dwarves for the Horde. I think overall they look pretty good, especially the male, but I do wish that you could have rock or crystal beards, like some people have suggested. Stone beards feels like a thing that is required. And I also wish that the female Earthen could have full mustaches too. Like if you're gonna give the female Earthen a beard, give me a big ass mustache as well. I don't want to have just a neck beard. We're gonna do it, let's do it. I want to have a beard that is as epic and full, including the mustache, as the men. One thing I can tell you is that if you gave the Earthen some stone beards, they wouldn't take it for granted. Oh, and you know what else? I heard a rumor that there's gonna be another race that they're gonna add that could be an allied race, and it looks really cool. It's like a bat, but it's also like an elf, and it's like a troll. I would like to play that. That's all I have to say about War Within. Keep in mind, we will have that WoW channel up soon. And we do have World of Warcraft guilds now. We have one for EU and one for NA. And I'll put those links in the comment section down below if you want to join our communities. And now I'm going to share with you our interview I had with the WoW devs. This is very exciting. Thanks for watching and enjoy the interview. It is really good to meet both of you. This is Michael Bybee and Sean McCann, is that correct?
Absolutely.
You worked on Mythic Plus Dungeons and on the Order Halls.
Yes, that's true. Also worked on Warfronts, and Sean and I worked together on a little thing called Exile's Reach.
Awesome. So Sean, you've done some quest design.
Yep, I worked on Exile's Reach, only the things that I know everyone liked. And so I worked on Nazmir, Exile's Reach, Azure Span, and I'm the Delves guy right now.
What is the most exciting thing you can tell me about Delves right now?
Oh man, what I can tell you,
yes, is there anything?
Man, one of the things that I'm really excited about are the fact that with a Delve, right, you can solo it or go in with anyone that you want, up to 5 people, right? Like my group of friends are very disorganized. I'm talking a lot of trash about them right now. They're probably going to give it to me when they see me again. But like, I'm the only healer. Everyone else is like, we just want to do DPS. I'm like, this doesn't work for us to do a lot of things in the game. Torghast was great because we could just jump in and do stuff there. But Delves are going to be fun too because it's like, hey, if there's 3 of us online, because also I have 3 kids, so it'd be tough for me to actually get things scheduled. So if there's 3 of us online, we can do a Delve. If no one's online, I can do a Delve. If there's 5 people, believe it or not, we can also do a Delve. And so
that's so nice, dude.
For that. I'm also really excited to see everyone's reactions to
that's
the
what
underwater
PvP should be
Delves
too.
that we have.
Oh.
I thought people were gonna hate
it might
them
be now.
when we experimented on it. I was like, I find this is kind of fun, but like I might be a weirdo. Like this might be bad. We made it so you can't swim, so it actually is like normal gameplay. There's not like having to look up and down and all that stuff. And then we play tested it. Everyone was like, "This is really fun," and I was like, "Thank God," because I was out of ideas for what to do with this one. And so I liked it a lot. I'm glad we all liked it, and I'm not crazy. So that one I'm really excited to see everyone's reactions to.
Yeah, I'm really hyped for Delves because that is something, like you said, you can easily hop in and hop out of it whenever you get a little time to do that. With Delves, just how hard can it become? Like, can this become truly painful?
Oh man, I have heard people describe Delves as truly painful, but it's the idea. I don't know how familiar you are with like the Mage Tower that the content that we had there. So the idea is that there is a 13th Delve that is essentially close to that level. It's not going to be as hard as the Mage Tower because we're not going to be balancing it like for each individual class. But the idea is that if you're completely done with the season, you've got all the cool customization rewards, and you're the kind of player that's like, I want you to hit me as hard as you can. The 13th Delve is there going, let's do it. We play tested it the other day. None of us beat it. We had like one of the reward designers who was like really good at the game, and he was like, wow, okay, yeah. Oof, that did it. That beat me. And so we'll try again next week, see what happens. There's not gonna be a timer on it, but it's just, it was the end of the play test. But yeah, so we are gonna have some difficulty. We want to make sure that's a thing that you can ramp up into that. And
Thank goodness, no timers.
I want to make sure that people feel like if you're not a person that likes difficulty, there is a satisfying end to Delves. If you're a person that is like, hey, I really wanted something hard, there's another satisfying end that you can pursue in Delves.
One thing I'm really excited about with the War Within is the hero talent system. One thing I do have to ask though is, are you worried about managing all the specs and talents when it comes to balance? Like how comfortable are y'all with imbalance in general? Because I feel like it's kind of, if things are too balanced and everything's so streamlined, things can just kind of become a little dull. But if they are too imbalanced, obviously that's extremely unfun as well. So how are you feeling about hero talents throwing another wrench in the mix for balancing?
I think the right way to say it is that we are also worried, but in the way that it means we're taking it really seriously. You know what I mean? Like it absolutely is complex. It really, in a way, isn't more complex than the system that we already had, because what we're doing is, we're adding hero talent trees, but each spec has access to 2 of the hero talent trees that are being added for that class. And so, overall, when you look at the mix of it, we're still, relatively speaking, we're balancing out the same amount of content with the same amount of difficulty. But it's something the team takes really seriously. Our whole class design team really, I would say, the whole team pays really close attention to what folks are saying, but the class design team is like, if they could plug in a machine and just read directly from players' brains all the time, I think they would, because they really care. Coming out of BlizzCon, when we announced the hero talent system, one of the first things that team said was, hey, we got to get these out to players. We have to start sharing these because we need to get feedback. And this was before marketing and PR was really ready to start talking about more of that stuff. But we figured out a way to make it work. And so we've been posting blogs about them because we honestly really wanted to get player feedback so that we could respond not just to, the balance concerns they had, but also to the fantasy concerns, like making sure that it felt like what they wanted to play when they thought about that kind of hero talent.
It was just funny because literally on the way back to my desk, I ran into some of the hero talent designers, and they were like, what are people saying? How is everyone seeing it? Like anything we should know? And I was like, they love Delves way more than hero talents. I'm sorry, no one's talking about it. And they were like, really? Like, no, everyone's talking about hero talents. They love it. They're excited for it. So they're all really excited to see what people have to say about it.
I'm extremely excited about the hero talents, and I feel like that's the heart and soul of World of Warcraft. So much of it revolves around that class fantasy, and I think that's one of the reasons that Order Halls was such a ballpark, knock it out of the park feature that everyone I know really, really loves, which actually brings me to the question, will Order Halls ever have an effect on future content?
I wouldn't rule it out, but it's definitely not something that we're talking about doing right now. I'm going to quickly turn that around back on you. And you said you were excited about the hero specs. I'm curious if there's one in particular that you think is really exciting, something you're jazzed about.
Oh, I really like the Trickster idea for Rogue. Rogue is my original class. That is what I rated on as back in the day, back in vanilla. I rated Blackwing Lair, and probably that might be one of my most precious and most cherished gaming memories, is being the last one standing on Nefarian, and everybody else died, and I had popped evasion, and then my chess piece dropped.
Wow, that is a memory. That is just like core memory
Everyone was
unlocked
cheering.
right there.
Yes,
Yes.
exactly. So for me, like the rogue stuff is always, I think that's really exciting for me. One thing I wanted to ask about the War Within and story stuff. I always love story, and I'm actually a huge side quest enjoyer. I love getting the side story from side quests and like learning about the world organically that way by adventuring. I think that's something that World of Warcraft has always done really, really well. But one thing I wanted to ask regarding story is, what do you think is essential knowledge for the story of the War Within? Like, what characters and events should people be aware of that might not have like a massive backlog of knowledge about the lore?
Well, one, I think, we have a lot of the big characters like Anduin, Illyria, things like that. But also, I think when we're trying to craft these stories, right, we want to make sure it's a 20-year-old game, right? And we want to make sure if you walk into it, you're not like, okay, I'm not part of this conversation. I don't know what's going on. We don't have like the comic book, like, see previously Legion, this one quest where Anduin said this. Like, we want to make sure it feels like you can enter in, jump into the story, understand what's going on. And then if you know more about Anduin, you know more about Illyria, then you have some like, oh, I kind of know maybe what's the subtle meaning of that might have been. But if you're like, I don't really know who this is, but Illyria is badass, and I can kind of tell what's going on here, then you can still hop into that. And so we want to make sure, also on top of that, right, it's like one of those things where, you don't want to answer a question that no one had. And so if you see Illyria when you're in for the first time and you say, okay, here's the deal, 10,000, she was stuck, and you're like, I just was wondering what that bow is. And so it's walking that line between like, it would be awesome, people want to get invested, but the best way to do that is to get them invested in this story happening now. And then they can go back and see other things that we have and go, oh, that's really cool. And now, I understand that, but they can still enjoy the main storyline.
So I just wanted to jump in and plug the dwarves real quick, because I think one of the really cool opportunities for this expansion is, the earthen, they're not dwarves, but they might be very dwarf-like, and there's a lot of cool dwarf culture there. And I think that, if anybody is looking to like brush up on a little bit of deep lore, understanding a little bit of the history of Magni and his family, Moira and her son Dagran, I think will help, because it's not required. It's definitely, you can get into the story without it, but there's some back history there that I think we're really exploring for the first time in a deep way that I think is compelling.
Do you feel like the way that the story is served up to players is going to feel different than it has in any way? Because I know we've kind of moved more into like a main story, a linear quest line. Like, how will it feel different, I guess?
There's a few things that we're changing, right? Like you mentioned, we have like the campaign bangs that say, hey, this is part of the main storyline. And so you kind of know like what to follow. The thing that we're also introducing now is the follower dungeons as part of the storyline. And so in the first zone that you'll be playing, right? If you haven't, I'm not sure if you've seen it yet, but there's a dungeon that will say, hey, you'll go into it and you can actually experience the dungeon with NPCs. And that you can see that story there. Where previously we either said, hey, let's just awkwardly avoid sending you into dungeons, even though they're a big part of the story. Or we say, yeah, you just got to go do the dungeon, figure it out. And so that's one big thing that like, hey, we can embrace that. We know how follower dungeons work. We have the technology. We have the resources. And it's something that we wanted to do for a really long time. So that's one way we're doing it. And then just from like quest to quest, I think there's things that, our narrative team and quest designers are looking at. Like, how can we improve things? Like, are there even just something as small as like, let's just put a little gossip to ask a question about more about the world, things like that. And if you're interested, you get a little bit more info. So there's things like that. We're always constantly trying to see how can we kind of punch it up a bit to deliver the story to everybody.
Are we thinking of this New World Soul saga as being a lot more lore heavy than it has been in the past? Like, and if so, like if this is going to be more story driven than it's been in the past, are we going to end up having a situation where there's raid bosses that are super spoilery? Like if you see someone fighting the boss, you're like, oh my God, I didn't know that was going to happen. Or like, won't the PTR be an issue with that as well?
Oh man, we talk about this all the time because we really don't want to spoil the main story beats. Probably the best way to answer that is that we've always planned multiple expansions ahead. So the fact that we announced all three is new, but the reality is we've always had multiple expansions in the works at once. And the three cohesive pieces of the World Soul Saga are part of a larger push to have a long-term story that not just we're excited about, that players are excited about, and something that we can share with folks. So we're really interested in that. And I do think you're going to see that in the storytelling. it's going to be a little bit more character driven. Some of the things that we started in Dragonflight, where we have more of what we call local stories, which is that side quest content that you're talking about that you can just go and explore that explains more of the world, right? We're gonna double down on that kind of stuff. And then I guess the thing that I would also just say is like, we really are committed to making the story of World of Warcraft feel just as compelling as every other part of that. And so, you know, there's a lot of changes going into this expansion to the team overall that are delivering on that, and we're excited about it.
I don't want to only ask all about the story, even though that's something that's near and dear to my heart. One question I do have is about more class race combos. Something that I have always wanted is Night Elf Paladin, like Night Elf Shaman. I know that there is some precedent for that in the story with characters like Delgrin and the Purifier and Ashenvale, but is that ever going to happen? Or is that not?
I'm sorry. I have to break your heart and say, unfortunately, no. It's not off the table entirely, but at the moment for the War Within, it's not something that we're talking about.
Okay.
We did a lot of additional class race combos in the Dragonflight. We feel like for the time being, we're going to, leave it be, focus on some other things, but that may be something that we revisit in the future.
Another question I have, looking back on all the best times that I ever had in WoW, usually those good times revolved around guilds, times that I had with my guild. But I know that sometimes it can feel just like a raid roster. Do you feel like there's any plans to update or modernize the guild system?
Absolutely.
The guild system needs to be modernized so bad. It's been the same since Cata, I'm pretty sure. They've actually taken stuff away.
We would love to do that. There is some work that we're doing right now about that. It's not something that we're really ready to like unveil in its entirety. But I can tell you that it's something that we care about a lot. We feel pretty strongly that guilds are the centerpiece of the social experience in WoW. Yeah. And it's something that, honestly, we haven't spent enough time on really bolstering. So
we need like plugins for Discord, that type of stuff.
Something that I've been getting into a lot recently is Mythic Plus. I love Mythic Plus because this is something, again, you can hop into whenever, you can hop out of whenever. Doesn't require a lot of time commitment, but it can also be really engaging and fun. I get a lot of enjoyment out of that recently. And I guess I would count myself as a returning player. I'm someone, I took a little while away from World of Warcraft, and recently with Dragonflight, I started to be, it started pulling me back in. And so I think that I speak for a lot of people who are also sort of in my same boat. But as someone who is learning keys, learning dungeons, and like a returner, one thing I have to ask is keystone depletion something that's here to stay? And if so, what is the reasoning behind that? Because especially for like sub 20 keys, when you have a lot of people like who are learning, it can easily be discouraged. I feel like when you fail a key, you waste a lot of time, and that itself feels like a penalty. Or if you have people leave, that also feels like a harsh enough penalty, but then you got your keystone depleted as well. Is that something that you want to keep in the game? or
yeah, I hear you for sure. And actually for myself, I started pushing keys even further than I had in the past with Dragonflight, because I had friends coming back. It was really exciting. I had a lot of fun. I finished some of my first 20 keys for the first time ever in season 3. It was exciting. And I know exactly what you're talking about. When you get a group together, maybe something goes wrong and, you fail, that already feels bad. You lose a key, that also just sort of doubles down. Yes. We are keeping that system, but one of the things, I don't know if you heard this or not, but we're changing the structure of the Mythic Plus dungeon system such that, today, in season 3, I guess I should say, you had, from 1, I guess technically Mythic 2 to 20 was a particular level, and it ranged all the way up. And the Mythic dungeon system now is changing such that Mythic 2 to 10 is no longer going to be part of Mythic Plus, but instead will be untimed. We're actually getting rid of all those levels. Heroic will be a harder difficulty than it was before, and Mythic 0 will actually be the equivalent of a Mythic 10 dungeon without the timer. And the intent there is actually to address directly what you're talking about, which is to make those earlier keys a lot more accessible for groups who are pushing, they're learning, etc. In fact, I have my dad and my uncle play
I don't know if I
constantly.
want to or not.
And they are, this specifically, I think is going to be better for them because they really have a hard time with the earlier keys.
Yeah.
However, but for the higher
That
end
will
keys,
make
we
me
are still
sick.
keeping the timer. We're still keeping the keystone depletion. And, you know, it's just, the numbers will be lower, but the difficulty will be about what you saw from a Mythic 11 to 20.
That makes complete sense. I think that there should still be, you know, some of that for the, I mean, for higher level, it makes more sense that the stakes should be higher. Another thing that I've been kind of getting into, but it's very difficult for me to get into again nowadays is the rating. Rating is much more difficult for me to do because you can't just hop in and out that easily compared to Mythic Plus. So one thing I wanted to ask, especially after having rating experience now in other MMOs, do you plan to add more quality of life improvements to raids? Like already you've done, you know, flavor pockets, great step in the right direction where you have these persistent food buffs through death. But what about maybe having it so when you wipe, you just let people release at full health at the boss? In short, like basically, because during raid time, I find people just want to raid, and the more time that they can die, pull, die, pull, die, pull, the more people learn more quickly, they're more willing to wait for people to learn because people learn at different speeds. Is that something that y'all have looked at all?
Probably not exactly the can I res at full health right where I died at the boss, but definitely reducing the runtime back to the boss fight is something that we 100% have done things. We will continue to do things. It's something we talk about when we build the raid encounters. And it's a little bit of a balancing act because we want it to feel meaningful when you die. But when you're pushing high-end content there, it doesn't feel meaningful. It just feels punishing. And definitely something that, you know, we keep talking about.
Yeah, I've noticed the harder the boss is, the more quickly people will just be like, okay, well, I don't feel like even waiting for people to, like, it's almost like the more time that you wait between pulls, the more people will just leave because they become impatient. Another thing kind of related to that is not having a warlock in the raid, I feel like slows it down a lot because you can't summon people to the boss. Like a lot of times the raid, again, it's like there's a patience meter that like depletes so fast that with people where people just don't want to bother with refilling a group because we don't have a warlock and we're not doing a boss. So like people just, it's so easy for these things to fall apart. I feel like because of that. So is that something that you've thought about, like maybe summoning without the warlock?
I think it's still a thing that we're figuring out. I think, you know, we're experimenting with some of that stuff in Delves with like the checkpoints that we have, where it's like, hey, you die and you come back. I know some of the dungeon people were like, that's not fair. You get to do that? I'm like, yep, we get to do that. So a lot of that is, hey, let's experiment with it in Delves and see how it feels. Another thing I kind of wanted to chime in too is that, and you know, I worked on different companies before, and what I really love here, kind of based off what you're saying, we have an email list of like just send feedback about the game, and so we get a lot of these things where people are like, hey, this isn't great. That'll go like, we'll get like Ian directly would be like, that's a really good point. We should really, you know what, let's get something in the schedule. Like we had something like that with the allied race unlocks where some of us were like, it's really confusing to unlock it, and like where do you get the faction and stuff like that. Like I was on that email thread and we were just like, let's just hotfix it, let's get rid of that part, let's make it easier for everybody. It's like boom, done. And so more just to kind of call out, like, even if we say here, hey, we can't do that, like we're having like constant discussions about like, hey, do we have time? Can we just sneak this thing in really fast? And with Delves, we get the opportunity to be like, let's test it out in a Delve, like a little bit of a lower stakes area. Let's try it out, see if we like it. And if we like it, cool. Now let's bring it into, you know, a different form in different areas. So,
one thing I want to say that I think is really positive that Blizzard is doing a lot of lately is experimenting. I've seen a lot of experimentation, and that is super healthy. Not afraid to try out new things and innovate. And that is something that I think is going to help the game evolve and to stay with the times here. Is there any plans on making the high-end rating more accessible? And this is kind of related to my last question. Like, I know a lot of people fighting the roster boss, having a hard time getting 20 people to do Mythic on raid night. Have there been any conversations about making Mythic a flex raid or removing Mythic lockouts?
Don't worry about me.
Definitely conversations, but we aren't making those changes right now. I think the question about accessibility is a big one that we have on the team all the time. And at this point now, with the Raid Finder, Normal, Heroic, and Mythic, it feels like there's a lot of options for players. But you're right. Like once you start getting up past you, like I beat the Heroic dungeon, or I beat the Heroic raid, I'm ready to push into the next tier, but it's hard to get the group together and keep it consistent. I think that there's a lot that we could still do there. So unfortunately, no specific changes to announce right now, but it is something, as Sean talks about, like it's a constant piece of feedback and a conversation on the team, and it is balanced against the idea that a Mythic Raid should have it's a specific expectation with some players that it is, it's like a team. It's almost like a team sport, and people see it as something that they want to keep, pretty structured. And so talking about how we might be able to help make it more accessible without taking that away from people is sort of the challenge there.
I would love a world where someone could say, hey, I can beat a tier 11 delve, easy peasy, let me on the team. And because right now, right, you kind of have the situation of how do I want to show that I'm really good? Well, I have to run a Mythic Dungeon with 4 other people and get to there. Where in this world, you can say, hey, I checked my DPS. I checked all this stuff. And I was able to survive a tier 11 delve with all these things. And you can go, cool, you're in. And so I'll be really curious. That's not necessarily a goal with delves, but it is a thing that's like, it's hard content now. It's not in the outdoor world. How does that gonna, shake things up a bit for things above? So I'll be curious to see how everyone feels about that.
I want to see the Raider IO score for delves.
Yeah. So I tend to be a competitive person, and so I'm really looking forward to pushing those delves and War Within. Actually, one thing I like about follower dungeons a lot is that I feel like it's such a safe environment to learn your class and practice your spec and play around with things. And one thing I wanted to ask relating to that, and maybe this is something that would be added onto it over time, but is there any conversations about maybe using it as teaching tools for players, like having those kinds of things built in to an environment like a follower dungeon where people can get additional feedback on how they're actually playing? Because I've noticed some specs can be really hard to learn without going to outside assistants like Wowhead or YouTubers, and sometimes they don't always give you the best information. So maybe having more of that feedback available within the game, is that something that y'all are looking at?
Oh man. This one is very close to Sean and I's heart.
Oh, really?
We worked really closely together on the Exiles Reach new player experience. And
it's so good.
It's like the other side of that, where it's like, how do you teach somebody who's never played World of Warcraft before what even their first few abilities are? And so, there are some tutorials in Exiles Reach that really teach some very, very, very simple mechanics. And it's something that Sean and I have talked about a lot. And I know the team has also been, having discussions around. I actually heard somebody this week talk about for follower dungeons. They were, hey, this boss might have 3 or 4 mechanics. How many of those are important to have in the follower dungeon version of that dungeon so that we're teaching players how to respond to those mechanics? Because, maybe it's a little overwhelming to have all 4 of those mechanics all at once, and especially for somebody who's brand new to healing and they're just trying to figure out how do they make sure that, Captain Garrick doesn't die for the first time or something like that.
Yeah, I do think Exiles Reach does a very good job of introducing basic stuff to the player, like how do you pick up an item, like what is a quest item, like all these basic stuff. I think it communicates it in a very fun way. So great job on that. I had a friend of mine who I just got them into World of Warcraft and they went through it recently and they enjoyed it quite a lot. They thought it was very good. So that's good feedback for y'all. Are there any plans to reignite more world PvP and encourage PvP at lower levels and not have people so scared of doing it?
I'll take that one too, Sean, based on the look on your face. No specific plans for the War Within, but I can tell you that the stuff I'm not sure how much you pay attention to Classic and Season of Discovery, but there's been a lot of conversation about the World PvP events that they've done there. And we're all part of the same team. So we pay really close attention to how players are feeling about that. And it's a conversation on our team about, hey, that thing that's happening over there in Classics, people seem to be really excited about that. Is there some way that we could create something that feels like that, but in modern WoW? And, we have the way our servers work are a little bit different from Classic, but it's definitely something that we're interested in pursuing if people are jazzed about it, which they seem to be for Classic.
Is there any like movies, books, games, or TV shows or anything that are being used as inspiration for the War Within towards storytelling or anything else?
I'll do the safe answer. I think in general, right, like with games and movies and things like that, I can really just talk to Delves on this. Whenever we're looking at a future, right, and we go, how do we want this to feel, right? It's usually I played, game bleep bleep and bleep. I'll self-censor myself, Alex. we go, hey, we kind of want to have like a mix of all those things, and then we kind of looked like, personally for me, sat down, played them, and went, okay, what's really cool here? What really made me feel fun? What really made me smile? And what was things that was like, this was terrible, let's not do that. And also understanding why it was bad, right? And so you can probably guess a few things that I won't say about how we got to Delves. But we're always kind of also looking at like, what would this be in like 2 years, right? Because we start this development for a long time, so it's not necessarily just this is fun now, but it's like, what's going to be fun in 2 years from now when like everyone does this? And so what's the version of this that's like 3 years later that we can just do now? And so it is a bit of push our glasses up and like investigating and doing a lot of testing and guesswork. There was a lot of versions of Delves before we got to this one internally. I know that's kind of a cop out because I'm not actually giving you like, hey, here's the exact thing. We'll tell you everything when the recording's off, and you promise not to say anything. But yeah, I mean, that's just kind of generally how the development goes on these things.
Okay, when was it decided that the giant sword was going to be the focus of the new story saga? That's my last question.
I'm not sure it is the focus of the new story.
I
guess we'll have to wait and see.
Oh, okay.
It was never decided. So
yes.
Okay. Appreciate y'all talking with me today. This was extremely fun. I remember when I first installed World of Warcraft in 2004, and it was like one of the happiest days. So like my inner child is freaking out right now.
Glad we could help you out with that. Yeah.
And frankly, welcome back. I hope that the game is, helping you fulfill some of that same experience again. We're trying really hard. And if there's anything we can do to make it better, you let us know.
All right. Yep. Well, thanks for the chat and good luck. I know y'all still probably have a lot of work to do. I'm really looking forward to the game.
Yeah, a lot to do.
All right.
Thank you. Take care.
Much.
Thank you so much.
Is the fundamental like structure of the thing is too unsound. The thing that creates pro football players and stand-up comedians and boxers and rock stars and like chaos.
All right, guys, I'm gonna take a quick break. We'll be back here in about 30 minutes doing the raid. So we're getting started. See you guys then.